Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me stop this share screen for a while because, where was that? This is the Minority of One report, and I'm Desiree Rover in the Netherlands, medical research journalist. And this is, I can't get the share screen out of the way, so let's just have it like this. There it is. Okay, let me see. Hop. Here I am. Okay. And good evening. Yes, it's an evening about vaccinations, and I will take you through what I have found in my research about what vaccines really do. Authorities always tell us that vaccines are safe and effective, but are they? I can tell you they are not. So I want to take you through a presentation that I did in Malmö in Sweden a long time ago, and that was a very special evening. And I'm still looking, here. And I want to explain to you all the things that are part of the vaccine story, because they are not safe, they are not effective. If you want to create real health, it's definitely not by vaccines. What we need for real health is substances, foodstuffs that communicate with our cells, with our tissues, with our bodies. And those are the natural compounds in our food, in our drink. That is the only way to build a happy, healthy body. The problem, of course, is that today's food is contaminated, is adulterated, has not the nutritional content that we should have. And then there is, when you take medications, those rob the body of vitamins, minerals, and other important substances to detoxify from our body. So that when our body wants to do the regular, normal processes, the substances to do that with are depleted. So Western medical science is not a very healthy thing for all of us. But let me take you through the presentation that I did in Malmö in 2014. I will do it like this, that's easier. Vaccination, I see it as a full-on biological attack on the human race. And it has become clear that vaccines and people have different reactions. And that is because everybody is a separate individual with a separate set of skills, so to speak, of the body to have an answer to the toxic substances in vaccines. Anyway, how did I get to do this? Finding out about what vaccines really do. Well, this is me way time ago, long time ago, in September 81 with my second son, Philippe. And this is me almost a year later. And you can see he has a tube in his nose to be fed, and his hair is going away. And that is because he turned out to have cancer had 2 enormous operations, and then went for, after the knife, he went for the radiation and the chemotherapy. Little did I know at that time how to do things differently, and I'm not sure whether it would have resulted in a good thing if I had tried to do that. Anyway, the tumor that he had was way down in his under backside, where they call the cauda equina, where all the nerve ends for the legs and so are. So he could not walk after the operation. But eventually he walked, because I made this left picture, this thing that he could walk in without being afraid to fall, because it had little wheels underneath. And then he had special shoes and a big smile and a cane. And that is a picture from March 83, and on Easter Sunday 1983 he died as a result of the chemotherapy. Adriamycin is what they call the Red Death, and that is what happened. His heart blew out, cardiomyopathy. But these days, in the hospital that I lived with him for months on end, 24/7, these days, the folding cots for parents are ready. I had to sleep on the floor or on a folding chair because they didn't want me to be there. But I had made a promise to my son. I will be there, and we do it together. And that is why and how I learned how doctors are being educated, and how, in fact, their education is a, how could you say that, a mind control program with sleep deprivation, bad food, huge stress, and that will personify, is that a word? I don't know. But that will make doctors into unfeeling people, because it's amazing what that sort of thing does to you, treatment. Anyway, here, this is the last we saw of my son. And actually we live in an upside down world, because Dr. Michael Ellner worded it like this: just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health by vaccines. Lawyers destroy justice. Universities destroy knowledge. Governments destroy freedom. The major media destroy information. And religions destroy spirituality. Well, I can tell you, I can find each one of these items very easily in my life. I have seen it all. And then the big art is to deal with that. So do you take the blue pill or do you take the red pill? And first, the good news. Disease is disbalance, and our bodies can very well heal themselves if you give them the stuff that they really need. And then that's, again, not vaccines. So you have to learn to understand the language of the body, because the body never lies. The body gives you a message. Even I, with my broken wrists, that was a message. It's not nice. It's no fun. It hurts, and it's a bother because I can't do anything well with my right hand still. But it is a message, and if you understand the message, then you can work with the whole thing. And your body has several things to show you that something is not quite right. Fever, diarrhea, vomiting, eczema, that sort of thing. And these are all modes to excrete toxins. And healing is a dynamic and holistic process involving all parts of what we are, body, mind, and spirit. So we have a lot of things that we can use. Love, for one, very important. Consciousness, awareness, posture, how do you hold your body? Breathing, because the posture, that dictates more or less whether you can breathe real well through your belly. Diet, very important. Our food is what builds our body and what helps our body to get the substances that we need. Attitude, how do we look at life? Are we positive or negative? And emotional cleansing. We all have experienced in our lives things that were not nice. How you deal with that will have an influence on your health, no doubt. And joy and laughter, humor is great to have. And to illustrate how important diet is, our food, it determines how we think, feel, act, and what we have created in our environment. Imagine these little boys, these twins. When they eat healthy, then 70 years later, they are still healthy, happy twins. But if they eat a lot of junk food in their lives, it does not take even 70 years, but only 20 to make them like this. So food is very important. And how can we help ourselves to heal? Well, water is a very important issue. But Mangelic is a doctor Iranian doctor who was thrown into jail because he was a doctor and he had only water and some salt to help patients heal. And he discovered how important water is. And for those of you who have seen the film What the Bleep Do We Know and remember the part of the science by Masaru Emoto, they know how important it is how we talk to ourselves, because water will take up those messages. And if those are negative messages, the water in our body will have a different energy than when we are happy and when we are positive. So it's very important how you deal with yourself from every moment. Well, homeopathy is a way of healing that challenges the body to go back into homeostasis, seek the balance that was lost. And that happens energetically. And nobody really understands how it works, but basically it's a combination of what Dr. Masaru Emoto has shown, that water has a memory and you can load it with information, with the right information, like with homeopathy. And there are scientists who didn't believe in homeopathy. They did an experiment, and then to their utmost surprise, it worked. And homeopathy worked. And they thought that was really awful. But then they had to accept their own findings. So that was interesting. It has happened many times. And the thing is with homeopathy, since Hahnemann created homeopathy, things have been added, but nothing has ever been changed in terms of its principles. And when you look at Western medical science, they change stuff all the time. So that's very interesting, I thought. light is a essential macronutrient, meaning that without it we die, with too little of it we become sick. So people who work nights and sleep in the daytime is not very healthy. We need those particles, light particles from the sun called biophotons. And we are beings of light ourselves. And the funny part is that when you can measure the light that we give off our bodies, the sicker we are, the more light we leak, so to speak. Well, electromagnetic frequencies are beautiful ways of helping the body to recreate the healthy situation, because basically we are electromagnetic beings. Sound, the human singing voice is very important. I do sound healing, for instance, bija mantras, singing into the chakras, and it's amazing what can happen then. The cleansing of old emotional patterns and reflexes is very important, because those are energies that are destructive to true health. And then we can help ourselves with natural remedies, essential oils, herbs and spices, and food supplements, all sorts of stuff. This is one of the books that Batman Galic wrote, Your Body's Many Cries for Water. You are not sick, you are thirsty. Vaccine Free, that is a book by Kate Birch. Prevention and Treatment of Infectious Contagious Disease with Homeopathy. Biophotonen, das Licht in unsere Zellen. The light in our cells. Oh, wait a minute. Well, we don't want that. The Body Electric, that is a beautiful book by Robert Becker. Read it. We are electromagnetic beings, no doubt whatsoever. And this is a beautiful thing, cymatics, soundscapes. When you have matter, like sand or salt, on a metal plate and you play a tone, then the sand will create patterns. You change the tone, the pattern will change. So that is how sound interacts with us as a human being as well. And then the Hidden Messages in Water, Masaru Emoto. And then the complete book of essential oils and aromatherapy. That is one of the many, many books that are there. So here they are again, all in my library. Strong medicine. We can do things with all sorts of natural and biological things. Vitamin C, even if it's sodium ascorbate out of China, doesn't matter. Take it. The only thing that you can do wrong with vitamin C is not taking enough of it. And that is what Dr. Thomas Levy told me. He wrote a book that will come later in the presentation. He wrote a book on vitamin C, and he learned it from a dentist who I also interviewed, Hal Huggins, who is not with us anymore, I'm sorry to say. But vitamin C is an essential macronutrient, again, like sunlight. We cannot do without. Without it, we die. With too little, we get sick. And all these people who have nosebleeds and bleeding gums and easily being bruised, those are people who have subclinical scorbut. That is to say, subclinical, not enough vitamin C in the body. Sodium bicarbonate will bring oxygen into your body, hydrogen peroxide also, but you have to know what you have to do, how you have to do it. Magnesium chloride is the transdermal oil. Magnesium is not in our food. take magnesium. This is an oily substance, very salty to the taste, but you can put it on your legs when you have cramps and they will go away immediately. Essential plant oils, herbs, colloidal silver, and MMS, all those things we can use, and just salt, but then the salt from Brittany in France, the Celtic salt. Here we have a very important doctor who found out what vitamin C can do for us, especially in terms of infectious diseases on one hand, but also vaccine damage on the other hand. Dr. Frederick Klenner had 60 children with polio. It was an epidemic of 60 children. Some of them couldn't breathe by themselves anymore. And he gave them intravenously vitamin C, sodium ascorbate, huge dosages, tens of grams, hundreds of grams. And they all went well again, without any paralysis that had been there. Nothing was wrong with them afterwards. And of course, every doctor should know this, but they don't, because doctors don't know anything about food, about vitamins, about substances that are not patented. And that is the only reason that vitamin C is not being used in hospitals. But this doctor showed what the power of vitamin C is. And I buy vitamin C from a food industry supplier. It comes out of China. It's sodium ascorbate. I put a teaspoon in lukewarm water in the morning and I drink it. And in the afternoon, and I drink it. And in the evening, and I drink it. Because vitamin C, if it's being used up in the body, you don't have enough, so you have to take it again. And if you take too much, you get the C flush, which is a sort of diarrhea. You have to be very quick to win that thing. But it's not bad for your body, not at all. And here is the book of Thomas Levy, who I was speaking about, Curing the Incurable, Vitamin C, Infectious Diseases and Toxins. And here is his quote: "The biggest mistake with vitamin C is taking too little of it." So, and then we have here James Lind, who saw that vitamin C was the solution for seamen that had scorbut in the 1700s. And Dr. Klenner says, when proper amounts, meaning grams, are used, it will destroy all virus organisms. And also vitamin C will cure, no, you can't say that, will neutralize wait a minute, I lost my train of thought. Free radicals, that's what it is. That's what I wanted to say. Free radicals are not free radicals anymore when there is enough vitamin C to donate to the free radical an electron. Here is a story of how intravenous vitamin C helped. Because this is a New Zealand farmer who was in the hospital, and the doctors in the hospital had used everything they could think of in terms of antibiotics and God knows what else. And then they decided to let him die because they were out of options. But the family found Dr. Thomas Levy, and they asked the treating doctors in the New Zealand hospital to use what vitamin C recipe Dr. Thomas Levy gave them. And even if the doctors in the New Zealand hospital gave less than Dr. Levy had said, this farmer, a couple of weeks later, came from the hospital, walked out, safe and sound. Colloidal silver. The silver particles oxidize the pathogenic organisms, and the silver ions steal and disrupt the vital electrons. So, Western medicine. What is the context and what are the patterns? In 1910, we have the Flexner Report. It was funded by the Rockefeller, Ford, Carnegie Foundations. It changed the face of medical science of the time. Medical education had to be technical, complicated, elitist. It had to be a long study, and it had to be self-cleansing, meaning that when students became doctors, they had to tell when their colleagues did things outside the protocols, the rules and regulations. And this is a quote by Mark Sircus, another doctor whom I interviewed. Where one gets their information is telling and for doctors crucial. Pharmaceutical muscle is evident not only in medical schools but in medical organizations, local medical boards, and in the governmental institutions that oversee medicine and public health. What he says here is very, very, very important, because when I apply this to vaccinations or organ donation at brain death, these doctors believe what they are being told in terms of the information. Then the politicians take what the doctors are saying, what they have learned, and then the governmental institutions and the laws will take everything and push it down the throats of the population. So if that message, that basic information where it all began is the wrong information, which it is with vaccination, and which it is with organ donation at brain death, because the donor is not dead at the moment his organs are harvested, then you have a legalized disaster, a legalized murder. So all of these medical organizations are in the business of strong-arming doctors, creating fearful and highly conditioned environments that continue outrageously dangerous, but profitable practices for the industry. And this is what it is. Mark Sircus says it how it is. And it's being put into place by trauma-based mind control, both in the doctors and both in the population, corporate brainwashing. And it comes down to what Mark Twain or Benjamin Disraeli, one of the two, said this: there are lies, dumb lies, and statistics, and vaccines. And this is an example by Bertrand Russell. He said, vaccinations are a chemical lobotomy. Whoa, what's that? A chemical lobotomy. A lobotomy was a sport that the doctors did at the beginning of the 1900s. They took an ice pick, shoved it up your nose, and started to poke around in your brain here. And it was to get people become quiet. Very, very crude. And vaccinations are a bit more elegant, but have the same effect. They also ruin parts of the brain. So they are a chemical lobotomy. And Bertrand Russell said something else which is very important, and that is what I saw when I witnessed these doctors getting their hands-on education in the hospital. Fichte, that was a German philosopher, laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils have left school or students have left the university as a doctor, they shall be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their professors would have wished. And a little while further in The Impact of Science on Society, he writes, diet, injections, vaccinations, and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable. And any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. And that is exactly what I have seen when I was invited by a think tank of the Dutch government. I call them the Tavistock Institute, but they're not the Tavistock Institute. They have a different name. I saw all the people working at governmental level, at institutional levels, at academic levels in the vaccine arena. They can only speak in one way. And they all recognize each other in that language. And when a person like me starts to say something about the history of how it all came together, and maybe the basis of vaccination is not so scientifically solid as they hope or think or whatever, dream, then I am cast aside like an idiot or a foolish grandmother or whatever. They try to ridicule me because they cannot hear or receive what I'm telling them. And the funny part is in words. Pharmakos is the Greek word for sorcerer, exorcist, and poisoner. And pharmakia is the administration of substances for sorcery or magical acts to connect with demons. Interesting. This is a CDC vaccination pledge. Well, this is how they want to have everybody there. I now have to not go to these things. Okay. This is an example of how many things work against our health with vaccines, in combination with vaccines. And these are all things that weren't there in the 1600s. Well, you can freeze the image if you want later on to find out what is all there. These are some subjects that I can talk about or want to talk about concerning vaccines. The origins of vaccination is very important. I have found out that looking into the history of things will teach you a hell of a lot about whether the subject, that the way we are being presented with it, is correct or not? Well, with vaccination, it's not correct. So there are a lot of different aspects, and I try to have a red thread in a logical way of explaining, but sometimes you have little alleys that go another way. First, terminology. Variolation, inoculation, immunization, vaccination. What do these words mean? Well, variolation and inoculation are two words for basically the same thing. That is, material to be introduced into a patient, from a human patient, introduced into a healthy person. And immunization is when you experience the natural disease. And vaccination is an injection into a healthy person of pathogens, adjuvantia, and incipients, the modern vaccine programs. But variolation and inoculation, you can use that. There is another thing that I can say about that. You can, and that is how it started, introducing into the body by making a scratch in the skin and introducing smallpox material, pustule material from a human smallpox patient into a healthy person. And later on with Jenner, it became cowpox material, which is a different entity. I will tell you all about it. So what the hell is it? Why do we vaccinate if it is all about these ugly, ugly substances? Because we are being told. There is a lot of fear mongering and emotional blackmail. Everybody does it, I hear people say. So they bring their child to the well baby visit to have them maybe vaccinated to death. It happens. And then they say it's the law. Well, in many, many, many countries, most countries, it's not the law, but they make you believe that you are obliged to vaccinate your baby. And it is to protect from infectious diseases. Well, tell me one thing. How can you protect a baby by injecting poisons? It's not logical. And then another excuse is to generate health. And very important, to avoid loss of working hours and money. Well, tell that to the people whose children have become autistic because of vaccines. It is a standard procedure, vaccination, and that is why parents do this. And there is only one of them who has this little device to save his life. But the others all follow the rest, the sheeple. So, from perfection, vaccination will bring you to devastation. All these parents will tell you, my child was happy and healthy, and then was there the vaccine, and then he didn't want to speak him anymore. She couldn't do the things that she did before. Her motor skills disappeared, and this, that, and the other. Horrible. And still, doctors keep telling us vaccines are safe and effective. It's a mantra. And the doctors do what they know, but do they know what they do? No, because they will always tell you it's not the vaccines when there is damage. Well, if you compare immunity from having the natural disease and seeing a live individual, they have two words: antibodies from a vaccination, and seeing that person's life-size cardboard picture. Your mind can see the individual, but because it's a life-size cardboard picture, you will know this is not the real thing. So vaccination misprograms the immune system, gives it all the wrong messages. And what are in these vaccines that are being touted as wonderful and protective and safe and effective and all the other nonsense? Well, let's see what the list is of the crap that's in it. Aluminum hydroxide, phosphate, aluminum sulfate, well, all sorts of animal tissues, all sorts of chemistry. You don't want that in your body. So if I have some syringes and I put in this beautiful green apple some of the substances of this list, will you give that apple to your child? Don't think so. So why have them injected into your baby and then expect health? Is it logical to expect health and protection from injecting this garbage? No, of course not. Well, with vaccination, a lot of issues are not very well known by doctors and parents. One is virus shedding by the vaccinated, meaning that if you have been vaccinated with an illness, with a virus, polio or whatever, then you shed that information around you for something like 3 weeks. And there is a surge of childhood diseases in a vaccinated group, and also very, very young babies who get whooping cough often get that from kids in the environment who have been vaccinated against whooping cough. There are no double-blind placebo-controlled studies concerning vaccines because the argument is that it is not loyal to the control group to let them think that they have been vaccinated while they have only received the saline solution, which is the pure placebo for vaccines. And of course, it comes from the bias that vaccines are safe and effective and that they will protect against anything, which they don't. Then in the trials for the HPV vaccines, the placebo in these tests were not a neutral saline solution. They had used not the pathogens, but yes, they had used the adjuvantia, the adjuvants. So then the vaccine comes out of the test much more positive than when compared with a simple neutral saline solution. Get my drift? And you know what? They call that solid science. To use the adjuvants as a placebo. Well, the adjuvants are so toxic most of the time. And of course, you get a lot of negative effects from them. So then the vaccine looks way, way better. the adverse effects in the product inserts, nobody reads them. No doctor reads them. That is why I took apart the whole vaccine program in the Netherlands. I read all the product inserts. I made an overview of all the vaccines, on which tissues they had been created, which adjuvants were in there, which excipients, which ingredients, the whole rigmarole. So people, parents, can take one look and see what is in a vaccine, and then they can decide, do I want this crap in my baby? The mortality rate of pertussis was practically non-existent. Meaning, yes, in the old days, kids died from whooping cough. But in more modern times, when whooping cough had disappeared almost, that is when they started to vaccinate. And then there was a doubling of outbreaks because of the vaccines. And there is this idea about herd immunity. But true herd immunity was discussed by Hedrich in an article in 1933. It was about measles. He found out that in a certain area, when a certain percentage, I think something like 62% of the population had had measles and had natural immunity for measles, then there was no measles outbreak. When the percentage went below 62%, then measles came back to immunize with a natural disease the population. These days, herd immunity is being hijacked as a term, and these days it basically is used for vaccination percentage. How many people have been vaccinated? That is called herd immunity. But you're not immune for any disease when you have been vaccinated. Never. Not true. Because vaccines will only give you antibodies, and that is only one tiny part of the immune system. So it's not going to work. And these antibodies will stay with you not lifelong. And all the outbreaks are in heavily vaccinated population groups. So do vaccines work? No, I don't think so. Sorry. Well, anyway, virus shedding is even 6 weeks. Holy Malone. Ah, this is right. See how these kids look. Ha! Vaccination is rape, as far as I'm concerned. It's penetration and ejaculation. This is the program in the Netherlands in 2014, because they made some changes. And this is in Sweden, also a lot. And this is what happened in the States. Look at that. This is where vaccines are mandatory in Europe. Well, you see Czech, Poland, Slovenia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Greek, a few, Italy, a few, Belgium, polio, and in France. Well, And then there is another aspect with vaccination. That is a silent, emotional, psychological, and social trauma. Because who is holding the baby when he or she gets vaccinated? Right, the mommy. So what is the message to the baby? The baby thinks, I can't trust my mother. She brings me to this guy who jabs my thigh and makes me ill for many days afterwards. So what sort of a mother do I have? And then when kids have been vaccinated, there are some telltale signs that show what is the matter in their tiny, beautiful bodies. These rosy cheeks, these butterfly cheeks, that is a vaccine-induced vitamin C deficiency. And then look at the eye whites near the nose. When they are not symmetrical, that is a sign of brain damage. That was the science of Andrew Molden, a doctor who studied his ass off to find out what was happening with babies when they had been vaccinated. And he found that the immune complexes that are a result of vaccines, these are big proteins, they travel through the bloodstream and then get stuck at places where we have these tiny, tiny ways of hair-like blood ways. And that happens in the brain and in the kidneys and other places. And when it happens in the brain, these babies have tiny damage in their brains. And you can see that by way of their eyes. If this is not symmetrical, or like this symmetrical, because you can see eye whites at the bottom or at the top asymmetrically, that is all signs of what is wrong in their brains. There you go. And this Andrew Molden, of course, was killed for what he found. And this is a classical book by Harris Coulter, Vaccination, Social Violence and Criminality. Because the brain is damaged, because vaccination is a chemical lobotomy, you get criminals, you get people who can't think straight. That's what it is. Here, MMR, mumps, measles, and rubella, and see what happens here. When you have the vaccines, that's the blue, then you have autism, goes the same, exactly the same as the line that the vaccines do. It's amazing. And here we have Christina England. She is a colleague of mine in Great Britain, and she writes the most interesting articles about vaccines. Hidden government papers on the measles vaccine exposed. Announcing UK government considering mandatory whooping cough vaccines for newborns. Oh yeah, let's jab them as soon as we can. SSPE, this is science that Dr. Rebecca Carley from drcarley.com explains on her website, drcarley.com. Subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. That is exactly the same as autism in terms of symptoms. And these are papers from that article of Christina England, 1972. It's all about autism. And it comes to light in August 2012. Shame on them. And this is a letter that a doctor wrote in 1979 to the Department of Health in England. I have had an increasing number of patients bringing their epileptic children and asking whether the whooping cough vaccine could have played a part in the disorder. Yeah, this doctor has seen it correctly. But of course, he will be waved away because it's not true. And this doctor, another doctor, following our telephone conversation about reactions to pertussis vaccination, whooping cough, I'm giving you data on which my remarks about the risk of severe brain damage are based. Whooping cough vaccine, whooping cough toxin is being used in a laboratory on animals to create brain damage. And when it's being given to your baby and your baby starts to scream his head off because his brain is on fire, then it's called a normal reaction. Is this psychopathic? Yes, it is. I'm sorry. Anyway, this is about years of diagnosis in autism cases in combination with mercury. And this was Simpson Wood, where they cooked the books to deny that mercury had anything to do with autism. By the way, there are MMR vaccines where there is no mercury in it. Doesn't need to, because any vaccine can cause brain damage. And all these people asking for green vaccines, they are crazy, because it's not just the mercury dummy. It is about all the stuff that is in vaccines. Gardasil alone is associated with more than 60% of all serious adverse reactions. Yeah. I wrote a book on the HPV vaccines in 2009. I asked some questions like, can it be that this or that will happen when girls are vaccinated with these new vaccines because they were made in a new DNA recombination way? And yes, all the things that I feared could happen have happened. Horrible. So we are so indoctrinated by the mantra vaccinations are safe and effective that most people cannot combine the results of vaccination with that it is from the vaccination. And it is an area full of emotions and beliefs. And our government says that it's okay, and my doctor says that it's okay, and I trust and accept, and everybody who says something against vaccines is aggressive. And we are being used, we are being played on doubt and guilt, because if I don't vaccinate my child, I might infect a vaccinated child. Oh, wait a minute. The child was vaccinated, so he was protected. What nonsense is this? Anyway, we need a paradigm shift. But that will not happen very quickly. Leonardo da Vinci said, there are three classes of people: those who see when they are shown, and those who do not see. and this is also very interesting, a great deal of intelligence can be invested in ignorance or in the keeping up of a mantra when the need for illusion is deep. And condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. So, from what perspective do we look at vaccines? Let's go into history, origins of vaccination. Because those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And then my question is, who is writing the history books and who is writing the medical textbooks? Okay, vaccination in history. It's been done for a long, long time, because for the longest time, people have seen that when a person had experienced an illness, he or she was immune for that illness when other people were becoming in an epidemic of it, sick. So in Arabia, there were pox lymph parties, and you could pay with fruits, and then you would get pox lymph in a little cut in your skin of your arm. In Persia, they purchased pox into punctured skin wounds, inoculation. In China, they did it differently. They used the dried pox pus of a patient and they blew it into the nostrils of a healthy person. Nasal insufflation. But we will see that smallpox is not a human-to-human infection. In 1717, the Jesuits, oh God, not again the Jesuits. They're always where there is mischief. Jesuits introduced smallpox inoculation from India to England, assisted by Lady Wortley Montagu. She used to be a beautiful woman, but when she had the smallpox, she lost her hair and her eyebrows and everything, and she was not so beautiful anymore. She was the wife of a person who was consul to Turkey, and she had seen in Turkey how old women traveled around with a little thingy with smallpox pus in it and were giving that to people in a cut in their skin to give them smallpox in a hope that they would have the disease in a mild way without all the pustules and the disfiguration afterwards, and be really immune for the disease later on. And then royalty interfered, and in 1721 Princess Caroline uses prisoners and orphans as test subjects to be inoculated with smallpox. But already in 1721 or 22, a Dr. Flagstaff wrote to a friend, Dr. Friend, "Posterity will marvel that a practice employed by a few ignorant women amongst an illiterate and unthinking people should have so suddenly been adopted by one of the politest nations in the world." And in the same book, I don't know whether that comes up later on, but in the same book there is a passage where somebody says, "I don't understand who it is going to be to put a stop to vaccination because I see it is culling the population." Anyway, vaccination is another thing than what happened in India, Persia, China, and Arabia. Because in 1774, there was this farmer, Benjamin Jesty. He wants to prove that cowpox variolation, so the introduction into a cut in the skin of cowpox vaccine, of cowpox pus, will protect against smallpox. But cowpox and smallpox are different entities, as we will see later on. This is cowpox, and cowpox looks like a syphilis chancre. That is what a doctor in later times concluded. This is how smallpox vaccination looks like. And to the left, you see the cowpox, and to the right, you see the smallpox vaccine results. No, real results, not. It doesn't say that it's vaccines. Anyway, this is the material that they used to create lesions in the skin to introduce whatever they wanted to introduce. And then enter Edward Jenner. He sees a horse's diseased heels and states, this is the source of smallpox. He has more of these incredible statements. Jenner shows a drawing of a milker's hand with cowpox to someone in London. And then our friend so-and-so treated my discovery as chimerical. Yes, of course. You know what a chimera is. A chimera is a mixed being, like a lion with the tail of a snake and the paws of another animal, doesn't matter. Yes, because vaccines are being made on tissue of animals. So the information of the animal tissue comes into a human body with the vaccination, inoculation, variolation, or whatever, because it all enters the bloodstream. And these are the instruments that Jenner used. Variolation and inoculation. Again, it's the ingrafting a healthy individual with a patient smallpox pus. And vaccination is infecting a healthy subject with cowpox pus. How did this happen? There was this folk myth by Benjamin Jesty. And on the basis of that folk myth, Edward Jenner started experimenting with cowpox, goatpox, sheeppox, swinepox, with horse grease, with the pustules, the material from the pustules of milkmaids who had cowpox. And he used his son and his gardener's son as guinea pigs. And then it became very complicated. In 1798, Edward Jenner published an inquiry into the causes and effects of the variole vaccinae, a disease discovered in some of the western counties of England, particularly Gloucestershire, and known as the cowpox. So this is the only time that the word terminology cowpox appears in this inquiry. And Jenner calls cowpox variole vaccinae. And smallpox are being called variola major or vera, the greater or the true variola. Vaccinia is a hybrid virus between smallpox and cowpox. Varicella is chickenpox. Variola minor is alastrim. And greatpox is syphilis. Still follow? Cowpox and smallpox. They are two different entities. So is this science? Well, the starting point of the belief, and see that the word lie is in that word, we have here that inquiry. And then Cruikshank says, I was so struck by the contents of this paper and the small amount of evidence upon which Jenner had first ventured to propose the substitution of cowpox inoculation or vaccination for the old system of smallpox inoculation or variolation, that I was induced to carefully look into the life of Jenner and the early history of vaccination as contained in Barron's biography of Jenner and in the correspondence and articles on the subject in contemporary medical and scientific periodicals. This Dr. Cruikshank didn't believe one bit of what Jenner was saying, and rightly so. And Dr. Charles Creighton, he was a professor of microscopic anatomy. He wrote Jenner and Vaccination. Based on an extended study of the original data, I conclude that Jenner's work was incorrect and that cowpox was not, as Jenner stated, variola vaccinae. And cowpox has nothing to do with variola, smallpox, and was not protective against variola, smallpox. And vaccination affords no protection against smallpox. So what Jenner does with his cowpox gives no protection against smallpox. Why? These are two completely different viral entities. Eleanor McBean, Poisoned Needle, 1957. So enormous are the profits from vaccination that many efforts are made by members of the medical profession to minimize the dangers of syphilis caused by vaccination. Yes, of course. From the cowpox pus, that is. One of these, Dr. Henry A. Martin of Boston, wrote a paper denying the possibility of syphilitic infection from this cause. Let me tell you that people who work with quantum biofeedback instruments, programs, computer programs, they find syphilis information in all of us because our forefathers and mothers have been inoculated with cowpox. So we all carry the information of syphilis in us. The London Lancet, in criticizing this paper, said the notion that animal lymph would be free from chances of syphilitic contamination is so fallacious that we are surprised to see Dr. Martin reproduce it. No. Animal tissue is full of crap, darlings. That's what it is. Then Dr. Charles Creighton again, in the Encyclopedia Britannica. The real affinity of cowpox is not to smallpox, but to the great pox, syphilis. The vaccinal roseola is not only very like the syphilitic roseola, but it means the same sort of thing. The vaccinal ulcer of everyday practice is, to all intents and purposes, a chunker, a syphilitic ulcer. And how does it all look? This is syphilis. And thank you, Columbus, for bringing it everywhere. This is smallpox, chickenpox, cowpox. Sorry, cowpox. See how different it all is? This is smallpox. This is chickenpox. Detoxing efforts of the body. Smallpox. Progressive vaccinia. These people have been vaccinated. People lost their arms sometimes. Oh yes. Eczema vaccinatum. This person was vaccinated. Look what she got. Her body is trying to get rid of the crap. Eczema vaccinatum. And this is how Jenner produced the calf serum, because this is a calf with a shaven belly with all sorts of wounds made by a knife, and there was cowpox being introduced. So then when the calf is real good sick and he has or she has a lot of lymph coming from these wounds, it gets harvested, and that is what you are being vaccinated with when you have a cowpox vaccination. And Jenner was the first to totally corrupt the human genome with RNA and DNA from other species. Chimeras. Here we are. This is a chimera. See? We humans are not purely human anymore because we have chicken information from the flu vaccines and many childhood vaccines, monkey information from the polio vaccines, the information of aborted babies in the measles and I think it was the rubella vaccines. Well, anyway, a lot of stuff that we don't want to have in our body. By vaccination, we are being turned into chimera. And this is how they used a calf first generation smallpox vaccine production on calf skin in 1960. And see the scarifier? That's a fork with 7 teeth, with very pointed, Anyway, with all these vaccines and Jenner nonsense, from 1796 to 1825, there was not any epidemic of smallpox in London. And then, oh gosh, later on. In 1800, Jenner's doctrine went to the US by Benjamin Waterhouse. And in 1803, the cowpox vaccinated children in Spain were dying from smallpox because the vaccine only had made their immune system weaker. In 1853, cowpox vaccination was mandated in England, and oh God, since the passing of the Compulsory Vaccination Act in 1853, we have had no less than 3 distinct epidemics. More than 14,000 deaths, to 20,000 deaths, and again, well, a total of 44,800 deaths. Because people had been vaccinated. And this is what happened to this seaman before vaccination, and after vaccination he lost his arm. And this is the result of what vaccination can look like when you lose your arm. Here, a little boy, immune compromised because he had a vaccine against cowpox, smallpox. Flesh-eating infection was in the vaccine. He died. This is a cat with a tumor there where she had been vaccinated. And these are chicken wings. You know where chickens are getting their vaccines? Right, in their wing. So, this is smallpox incidents in Ethiopia. Need I say more? Oh, it's incredible. Here, Dr. Campbell, he was a great person. He found in 1900 that the cause of smallpox was not human-to-human transmission. There was a little girl coming in with her whole family. All of them had smallpox. So they all went to the pest house, as it was called. And Dr. Campbell was working there. And this little girl was sick for 6 weeks, living in between all these people with smallpox in the pest house. And she didn't fall ill. She didn't get smallpox. But then, as soon as she went home with her family, she got smallpox. So Dr. Campbell investigated and found that her mattress was full of bedbugs. So he found that smallpox infection has to do with hygiene. And he also found that it had to do with bad harvests, because the epidemics were always after a bad harvest in winter, that people didn't get enough vitamins and minerals from their food. And they had vitamin C deficiency. And he found also that vitamin C helped him to modulate the effects of the smallpox disease. And now here is the proof that already in 1763, it was very well known that smallpox was carried in blankets. You will do well to try to inoculate the Indians by means of blankets with bedbugs carrying smallpox, as well as to try every other method that can serve to extirpate this execrable race. I should be very glad your scheme for hunting them down by dogs could take effect, but England is at too great a distance to think of that at present. Here is the proof that people in the army and in the government knew already in the 1700s that dirty blankets helped spread smallpox. There's the date. Inoculate by means of blankets that can serve to extirpate. And here we have the culprit, Cimes lectularius, the bed bug. Don't let the bed bugs bite you. That song is not for nothing. That is about this little animal. And this is in 1876. There is no protection against smallpox, but in cleanliness. Vaccination, like inoculation, is a monstrous piece of superstition. Vaccination is blood poisoning. And that's what it is. Get it in your head. Vaccination is blood poisoning. And it is little better than cool and deliberate murder. That is what it is. Sir Thomas Sydenham, a very important person developed a new smallpox treatment that reduced the death rate from about 50% to 1% or 2%. His reward was being challenged to a duel. The English Medical Association wanted to drive him out. That, to this day, happens with doctors who do the right thing, believe it or not. Vaccination is a gigantic delusion. It has never saved a single life, but that it has been the cause of so much disease, so many deaths, such a vast amount of utterly needless and altogether undeserved suffering, that it will be classed by the coming generation among the greatest errors of an ignorant and prejudiced age, and its penal enforcement the foulest blot on the generally beneficent course of legislation during our century. Well, I'm sorry to inform you, Mr. Alfred Russel Wallace. It is 2016 and that damned vaccination idea is still alive and kicking. Use of smallpox, vaccinia. Vaccinia is the hybrid virus created by cowpox in combination with smallpox. As the potential benefits of vaccination do not outweigh the risk of vaccine complications. How? Are they honest for the first time here? Now look at this. Vaccines mandated in countries. Underage mortality, that's the red. And the yellow line is mortality increase trend line. So the more vaccines, 11, 12, 13, 16, 27, 28, 36, United States, the more vaccines, the more kids die below the age of 5 years. Here, under age 5 influenza deaths, before and after the US CDC mandates flu vaccines in early childhood. Well, look at that in 2002. The vaccines get mandated. Puff! Lovely, isn't it? Here, autism versus disabilities. All disabilities is the blue line, ages 6 to 22, and red is autism in ages 6 to 22, from 1993 till 2003. Well, today, the red line will be far above the graphic. The medical paradigm. How do doctors think? How they are being educated? Pasteur said on his deathbed, "Ce n'est pas les microbes, c'est le milieu. It's not the microbe, it's the environment." And with that, he said what one of the greatest scientists of his time said, and I come to that later. I have said repeatedly and professed that the inoculations pretended to be anti-rabic of Mr. Pasteur are in principle nonsense and in practice would be deceptive. So Louis Pasteur had his germ theory. There is one germ that creates one illness and you have then a medicine you can use on that. And he created rabies vaccines. But like Jenner, he created many, many deaths and people who were damaged. And the true scientist who I was talking about is this person, Pierre-Antoine Deschamps. And he had the idea of polymorphism, that a microbe can change shape. And when it is, like Claude Bernard found, the milieu intérieur, the internal environment, if the internal environment in a body is healthy, a pathogen will not be disease creating, or a viral entity or a bacterial entity, but change the milieu inside like we do with plants. Here, hydrangeas. In an alkaline soil it's blue, in an acidic soil it's red. Same plant, same flower, different color. Same sort of thing happens with microbes. Polymorphism. In a rich milieu, it changes forms, but it will not become pathogenic. In a poor milieu, it will become pathogenic. So, what's the solution? To have a healthy internal milieu. The characteristic microbe of a disease might be a symptom instead of a cause. And you know what? I found that when women have a bad diet or are using the contraception pill, then the cervix might not have the nutrients it needs to be healthy. And a non-healthy cervix will get lesions. And in lesions, in sick tissue, pathogens love to be there. So, when you are on the pill or you have a deficient diet, then you will not have the nutrients to create a healthy cervix. And that is why HPVs can be found in the lesions in the cervix. But they are a symptom or a signal of a nutritional disbalance. And if you don't want to have cervical cancer, start by creating a diet and a lifestyle. Forget about the contraception pill, because it depletes a humongous amount of vitamins and other minerals and minerals from the body. So if you want to be healthy, if you want to have a healthy cervix, pay attention to what you eat and don't use pharmacins, because these pharmaceutical products are toxic, are foreign to the body, therefore toxic, and need a lot of stuff that the body needs to get detoxed from the body. Polymorphism and environment. Antoine Béchamp found that. Günther Enlein found that. Royal Raymond Rife found that. Gaston Naessens found that. They all had their own typical words to describe what they saw. Microzema, protid, symbiont, endobiont, somatid. Doesn't matter. Talk about the same thing. But this is not mainstream medicines. And true health is never the absence of disease. And it's never a question of, have you had enough vaccines, doctors, and all medication? Or is true health created and maintained by maybe fresh and nutritious organic foods, pure vital water and clean air, personal hygiene, sanitary facilities, stress management? Do we need vaccines? I don't think so. The arrows give the introduction of antibiotics, of diphtheria vaccination, whooping cough vaccination, and measles vaccination. And what is very clear is that all the diseases, measles, whooping cough, diphtheria, and scarlet fever, were on their way to zero long before vaccines came into being, and scarlet fever never knew a vaccine. And these are the mortality rates in the United States: measles, scarlet fever, typhoid, whooping cough, diphtheria. Look at that. In 1900, they were high. In 1940, nowhere to be seen. Okay, here we have a graph. Improved nutrition, 1750, 1800. Registration of death started in 1838. And modern hospitals and antibiotics came into being in the 1940s. So, you see what happened to diseases. Improved nutrition was very important. Improved sanitation was very important. What do the mainstream people show you? Only this part of the graph. Yeah. Are they biased? Think so. Pro-vaccinators do not want you to know about the 90% decrease in infectious diseases before any vaccine program started. Are they biased? Yeah, think so. Here again, polio death rate was decreasing on its own before the vaccines were there. I'd say so. Oh God, we live in opposite day. The lingo says you are vaccinated against a disease, but the reality is you are injected with a disease. Vaccination is sensitization. You get more susceptible to the vaccines. This is a quote by Dr. Vera Scheibner, a very, very good friend of mine who has been studying the effects of vaccination since the late 80s of the last century. Vaccination, by introducing viruses directly into the bloodstream, far from preventing diseases, actually pushes the disease into a chronic form deeper into the body, where it then attacks the vital organs. Plus, that is Dr. Rebecca Carley who says that, there is no hope of healing because the chronic form is so deeply imprinted into the body, forget it. It's not going to work. Injected viruses. They all talk about attenuated or killed virus, but a virus is simply a package of proteins. It's neither dead nor alive. Attenuated viruses may lay dormant for a long, long time in the body, may mutate and combine with other viruses and create new ones. They can become virulent and they exchange genetic information. That's what I just said with mutating. And then immune suppression. If you say to the vaccinating authorities in the Netherlands that vaccines give immune suppression, they tell you that you are totally crazy. Reported cases of poliomyelitis closely following pertussis vaccination within days before the onset of symptoms. Polio can be caused by any vaccine. Has nothing to do with polio vaccines whatsoever. You can create polio by a combination of chemicals and nuclear radiation. Is another possibility. That's why in the 1950s, when they were throwing nuclear bombs left, right, and center, there were so many cases of polio. And if these people had known to use mega amounts of vitamin C intravenously with these children, we wouldn't have so many limping people in constant pain today, because they had polio as a kid. The association between administration of pertussis and or pertussis diphtheria toxoid and provocation poliomyelitis within 1 to 90 days after the injections. Whoa. Influence of pediatric vaccines on amygdala growth and opioid ligand binding in rhesus macaque infants. Yeah, so the amygdala was significantly altered in infant macaques when they received the vaccine schedule. Don't think that the same result is not in children. Of course it is. Here are some effects. Clinical poliomyelitis in association with peripheral inoculation of prophylactics. Vaccination, in other words. Poliomyelitis occurring after antigen injections. Vaccinations, in other words. Local paralysis in children after injections. Vaccinations, in other words. Incidence of paralysis occurring in London children within 4 weeks after immunization. Vaccination, in other words. Provocation poliomyelitis neglected clinical observations from 1914 to 1950. A YAWS campaign and an epidemic of poliomyelitis. Vaccination, in other words. Oh God, did you know teething produces histamines which open the blood-brain barrier? Vaccinating during teething gives neurotoxins direct access to your baby's brain. You have a choice. Yeah, forget about those stupid, maiming, and killing vaccines. Don't do it. Oh yeah, this is in the vaccines. Lovely stuff. Culture medium, adjuvants and contaminations. Pathogens are being created on a culture medium of animal origin, and then they get production, ingredients, and excipients. And then the adjuvants, toxic metals and toxic chemicals. Now, this is the preparation stages. It's not so important, but the only thing you need to remember is that every step of the preparation stages entails a possibility for contamination with stuff that you don't want in there. Now, tissue cultures are HeLa cells. That is the cervical cancer cells of Henrietta Lacks. Immortal cells, cancer cells. Lovely, huh? That information in your body. Vero cells, that is kidney tissue from monkeys. Fetal bovine serum. Human retinal cells. Porcine trypsin from pigs. Yeast cells. Lovely. Now, what contamination? Cervical cancer. SV40, cancer. Transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. Autoimmune diseases. Pancreas trouble. HPV rDNA. And then we have the human diploid lung fibroblasts in two varieties. That means these are cell lines from aborted fetuses, aborted babies. Vero cells are the kidney cells of African green monkeys filled to the brim with SV40, a cancer-causing virus. They found it in 1992. They found these exact SV40 viruses in the brain tumors of adult Americans. So how long does it take for vaccine results to show themselves? Well, sometimes even 60 years. Doesn't matter. from 1 second to 60 years, you can have vaccine damage. This is how I made a breakdown of the vaccines in the Dutch program for babies, vaccine program for babies. It is awesome. What a crap in our body. Formaldehyde, yeah, right. Hydrated aluminum hydroxide, yes. Yeast cells, lovely. Aluminum phosphate, oh great. Give me some more. So, what is in these vaccines? Chicken embryos, diploid lung fibroblasts, vero cells, yeast cells, and insect cells. Ha! Great. Known contaminations: cancer, AIDS, miscarriage, abortion, infertility, Gulf War syndrome, hyperaggression, hypersexuality, chronic inflammation. We never know what they put in vaccines next to the contamination. They can put into vaccines whatever they want. Because when they say it is a proprietary formula, they can put in whatever they want. Here is an article. Aluminum is highly neurotoxic and has been shown to impair both prenatal and postnatal brain development in humans and experimental animals. In addition to its neurotoxic properties, aluminum is a potent stimulator of the immune system, which is the very reason why it is used as an adjuvant. Given this, it's somewhat surprising to find that in spite of over 80 years of use, the safety of aluminum adjuvants continues to rest on assumptions rather than scientific evidence. Right. So, and I know I have a book by the NATO, and in there it says, a book about vaccines, and it says, maybe it comes later, but then I can skip it quickly. It says that aluminum has been put into vaccines in 1926 and it has never been tested for safety. And the same scientist who writes that sentence says, if it were to be introduced into vaccines today, I'm not so sure that aluminum would be accepted. Professor Günther Enderlein said, aluminum and mercury inhibit a pathogen to revert back to a harmless type. In other words, aluminum and mercury muck up your internal environment. That's why the pathogens cannot revert to a harmless state. Lovely, isn't it? Oh yeah, here, never tested in vaccines since 1926. Aluminum changes the cellular electromagnetic potential, and it brings deranged spatial structures of proteins and amino acids, because these proteins fold in 3 dimensions differently, so they become different products. Aluminum salts lead to a clotting effect that is 6,000 times increased. And aluminum hydroxide is an aluminum salt that dissociates rapidly and enters the bloodstream quickly. It is not safe. All salts of aluminum are poisonous when injected subcutaneously or intravenously. 1927. This is the book I was talking about. A workshop by NATO in Greece. And this is the passage that I wanted to have you known here. Aluminum was introduced in 1926 before strict control by regulatory authorities was practiced. Whether it would be allowed by regulator to today is far from certain. Right. Pertussis toxin creates brain inflammation, damages the pancreas and the immune system. Tetanus toxin does all sorts of nice things. Pertussis toxin is used to cause brain inflammation in lab animals and babies, inconsolable crying, diabetes obesitas, and the neutrophils, the white blood cells, decrease. With tetanus toxin, the viral replication increases. And measles virus has a structure similar to basal myelin protein, MS. Vaccination and medication lower our frequency. Vaccines break the connection with the cosmos through the pineal gland. Children have dull and dead eyes, and the brain damage shows itself in the asymmetry of their eye whites. Here, Andrew Molden again. Vaccines compromise the cell's natural intelligence, cause autoimmune reactions to DNA, albumin, laminin, cardiolipin, collagen. I mean, damage, damage, damage. Tissue repair, cell replication, adhesion, spread, differentiation, proliferation, movement of cells, all is damaged. Blood clots, miscarriage, neurological damage, and damaged vascular and connective tissues. Because vaccines create vitamin C decrease, or you don't have at all. And it's the same as it was in 1889 when Dr. Cruikshank wrote his book. Vaccinated were completely occupied with the technique of vaccination, to the exclusion of any precise knowledge of the history and pathology of the diseases from which their lymph stocks had been obtained. The imperfect knowledge which we at present possess on many points connected with a natural history of the variolae vaccinae and the numerous and formidable impediments to the improvement and extension of that knowledge demand the continuance of vigilant, patient, and diligent inquiry. Never happened. And here is what I alluded to in the beginning, how far the legislator may think fit to interpose in order to prevent such an artificial way of depopulating a country is not my province to determine. That was the same Dr. Wagstaff in the same letter to his doctor friend, Dr. Fred. So vaccines kill people. Very clear. Unfortunately, a belief in the efficacy of vaccination has been so enforced in the education of the medical practitioner that it is hardly probable that the futility of the practice will be generally acknowledged in our generation. Yeah, right, he is. He wrote this in 1936, to crying out loud. Interesting. The World Health Organization vaccine recommendation, scientific flaws or criminal misconduct. There is sufficient evidence in the open literature to suggest scientific incompetence, misconduct, or even criminal malfeasance. Ha! No word of Spanish there. Some of them children who had died after being immunized. The truth, when you finally chase it down, is almost worse than your darkest vision and fears. tissue scarlet. Yeah, that is what it looks like. And that is what happens after vaccination. And then we come to shaken baby syndrome. That's what happens when kids are being vaccinated. And this is the guy who found that with dolls with a lot of technical stuff inside, you cannot shake a baby in such a way that you will see the results as in a fictitious diagnosis of shaken baby syndrome. Parents, listen up. When you are being accused of shaken baby syndrome, demand to have your baby tested, his blood have tested on vitamin C and histamine. If vitamin C is hardly there and histamine is way out of the graph, then you know it's vaccine damage and you have not done anything wrong to your baby. And never ever tell the authorities that you shook him because you found him blue in his bed or her, and you shook him to get him or her back to life. Don't say that, because then you have this shaken baby syndrome thing slapped on you and it will stick until eternity. So have the blood checked for vitamin C content and histamine content, and that is your way of showing that it is vaccine damage and not you being rough with your baby. Because shaken baby syndrome is a fictitious diagnosis. It is acute scorbut, acute decrease in vitamin C. And it creates brain damage, and the microglia attack the brain and the breathing center. So that's why your baby can't breathe anymore. That is what it is. Here, have the blood and serum tested for vitamin C and histamine levels. When vitamin C is low and histamine is very high, your baby has vaccine damage. And this is what Dr. Vera Scheibler found. The blood serum of a sudden infancy death syndrome baby is so toxic that the minutest quantity of it injected into a mouse will kill the mouse. When you're newly vaccinated, you're an asymptomatic carrier, which is good for you, but not for the population. Well, it's not good for you. That is what this guy didn't get right. But anyway, you are shedding. That's what it is. Children who haven't been receiving all 5 recommended doses of DTaP are not the driving force behind the large-scale outbreaks or epidemics. Right. Okay. Do not take vaccination. It's a deceptive way you are giving the establishments biological warfare infections. Very clear. There is a great deal of evidence to prove that immunization of children does more harm than good. This guy was let go. Vaccination is a weapon of mass destruction. Dr. Rebecca Carley. This is interesting. Binary weapons, effects of viruses on the immune system, immune complex diseases, and antibody-mediated immunological injury. So what you do, you switch off the immune system. Pertussis toxin does that. You introduce viruses, and the tetanus toxin enhances the viral replication, and then you switch the immune system back on full blast. Then you have a cytokine storm, and that is when you have the immune system turned into a biological weapon against itself. Great. Well, the medical paradigm is created on a lot of stuff that is not true. But I see that it is almost 10 o'clock. I will go out of the share screen because I think I'm almost done. Yeah, I have 2 minutes. Yeah, well, I think my time is up. So, dear listeners, dear viewers, dear people, dear parents, please think twice. Study what vaccines do. And if I could do my life over, I would never, ever use a vaccine on my children. I lost a son to cancer due to the SV40 in the polio vaccines. He was killed because of the chemotherapy. I don't want you to live through that. This was the Minority of One report of October 16, 2016. I'm your host, Desiree Rover. Till the next, the Minority of One report.
Thank you for tuning into CCN. This unique network is dedicated to free and independent media. CCN was created with the belief that information is the common heritage of all beings, which is why our live stream high-definition broadcast is easily accessible and free to view. If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Having produced over 1,000 shows in 2015, which are all archived on YouTube, we look forward to bringing you more groundbreaking, cutting-edge information in 2016. For more information on what is on, please check out our broadcast guide for weekly updates. CCN broadcasts in multiple languages and features some key voices of our challenging times who are all in pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world. CCN belongs to you, the people, and it is up to you all to keep this network on the air. Please contribute to the Network Support Fund or visit the CCN shop. We thank you all for supporting free and independent media.